Hey, Thunder Pocus here. Today I'll recap a romance comedy film from 2017, named The Little Hours. Now grab a cup of coffee and enjoy the recap. The time is summer of 1347. Sister Ginevra noticed Sister Fernanda missing morning prayer at the Italian convent. Later, Fernanda arrived with a donkey, claiming it had escaped. Ginevra found it odd since the donkey couldn't open the gates. She also thought it strange that Fernanda wore her black habit in spring. When handyman Lurco greeted them, the sisters yelled at him for making eye contact, as they must stay pure. Mother Maria later questioned Fernanda about her absence and grew suspicious of the donkey story, as it often went missing under Fernanda's care. Maria then organized shelves with Ginevra, who shared gossip about other nuns' misbehavior. Meanwhile, Sister Alessandra lived a miserable life, forced to support the church by her father. She spent her days praying and embroidering, hoping to see her suitor again. Contact with the outside world was limited, and when her father visited, she could barely see him through a metal shade. In the afternoon, as the three sisters walked down the road, Fernanda yelled at Lurco for looking, with Ginevra throwing turnips at him. Alessandra, initially shocked, joined in yelling insults and breaking Lurco's things to cope with her frustrations. Lurco, helpless on the ground, endured their abuse as they spat on him and called him a Jew. Later, Father Tommaso left the convent to sell embroidery in town, and Lurco approached him, expressing his exhaustion from mistreatment and quitting. Meanwhile, in a nearby castle, Lord Bruno discovered his wife was having an affair with the servant Macedo. As soon as Bruno walks into the room, Macedo quickly slips out through the window and sneaks back to the servants' quarters, pretending to be fast asleep. Bruno, not wanting to cause a scene in front of everyone, decides to take a piece of Macedo's hair to identify him in the morning. Little does he know, Macedo uses the same knife to collect a strand of hair from each and every servant in the room. The next day, Bruno's wife approaches Macedo, expressing her desire to continue their affair. Macedo tries to ignore her advances, but she persists and forces him to kiss her. Unfortunately for them, Bruno witnesses the whole thing and orders the guards to hunt down Macedo. Filled with fear, the servant flees and manages to lose the guards by disappearing into the forest. Near the river, he stumbles upon Tommaso, who, instead of selling his embroidery, has gotten drunk and accidentally dropped all the fabrics into the water. Macedo lends a helping hand, retrieving a few salvageable items and fixing the cart. Grateful for his assistance, Tommaso offers Macedo a place to spend the night in his shack. In the evening, they share some food and drinks, and Macedo takes the opportunity to confess his past sins to Tommaso. Shocked by the revelation of some scandalous acts he never knew existed, Tommaso is taken aback. When Macedo expresses his desire to start anew as a good man and reveals that he's being pursued, Tommaso comes up with an idea. The following day, Tommaso brings Macedo to the convent and introduces him as the new handyman, but Macedo pretends to be deaf-mute. When Maria inquires about the missing fabrics, Tommaso lies and claims they were stolen. Macedo begins working at the convent, catching the attention and curiosity of Ginevra and Fernanda. Some time later, Alessandra attempts to teach a new novice about the convent's routine, but Fernanda obstructs their path by pretending to sweep. Frustrated, Alessandra demands an explanation, only to be interrupted by Macedo's arrival to work on the wall, flashing a smile at them. Fernanda panics and grabs an axe to scare him, thinking he's an intruder. Luckily, Alessandra brings Maria, who clarifies things before it gets worse. Fernanda then enjoys yelling into Macedo's supposedly deaf ears while Maria informs Alessandra that the embroidery was stolen, so they have to work twice as hard to make up for it. Alessandra now partners with a quiet elderly sister, making the situation even more gloomy. Out of frustration, Alessandra accidentally breaks her embroidery frame, so she asks Macedo to repair it. Fernanda and Ginevra observe from a distance, finding it suspicious that Alessandra is meeting a guy privately. While Macedo fixes the frame, Alessandra seizes the chance to vent and cry about her troubles, annoying Macedo who pretends not to hear her. Later, it's time for confession. Ginevra confesses her impure thoughts after initially admitting to eating a turnip without sharing. Fernanda tries to copy Ginevra's confession, leading Father Tommaso to scold her for eavesdropping and missing prayers. Fernanda insists she has no other sins. That night, Fernanda helps Marta sneak into the convent, where they steal the mass wine and drink with Alessandra in her room. They have a blast, but Ginevra interrupts, only to be persuaded to join them. Marta gets Alessandra and Ginevra to admit they've never been with a man, sharing stories of the wonders of intimacy and using belladonna to enhance attractiveness. After Alessandra falls asleep, Fernanda and Marta kiss and try to involve Ginevra, who resists until Fernanda takes her to her room, where they end up spending the night together. The following day, Alessandra hands Macedo an embroidered handkerchief to wipe his sweat. She assists him with gardening, feeling hot enough to remove her veil. Tension builds, leading to a sudden kiss that prompts Macedo to push Alessandra to the ground for intimacy. The ringing bell startles Alessandra, causing her to push Macedo away and flee. During prayers, Fernanda notices dirt under Alessandra's nails. Later, Ginevra and Fernanda do laundry, with Ginevra attempting to discuss the previous night's events, only to be shut down by Fernanda. Alessandra arrives to wash her veil, raising suspicions as she never washes anything. After admitting it got dirty with Macedo, she leaves it for Ginevra to clean. Jealous Fernanda leaves to clean the cellar, but Ginevra finds it empty. Meanwhile, Fernanda meets Marta, who uses belladonna to dilate her eyes and adds color to her cheeks with blood. Ginevra witnesses most of this behind the plants. Marta and Fernanda find Macedo and involve him in their activities. Ginevra discovers the belladonna pot and searches for them, but they finish before she arrives, acting innocent. Ginevra questions the significance of the night to Fernanda, who dismisses it as just for fun. Macedo tells Tommaso he plans to stay longer, interrupted by Maria's arrival, prompting him to hide while Tommaso takes her for a walk. The following day, Maria and Tommaso welcome the bishop for an inspection. Macedo sneaks into Alessandra's room through a window to engage in some mischief. While they are occupied, the old helper's sister enters without noticing them. Tommaso cannot help but curse when he spots her. Alessandra is surprised to hear him speak, but before she can address it, they hear people approaching. Tommaso hides under the bed as Alessandra hurries to fix her clothes. The bishop and Maria find everything in order, so Tommaso escapes through the window once they leave. Later, the bishop notices discrepancies in the accounting. Books due to Maria and Tommaso manipulating numbers to conceal theft. Ginevra interrupts them, wanting to report Fernanda. Maria takes her aside to discuss privately, not taking Ginevra's tale seriously. After a long day, Ginevra discovers a sleeping Macedo and gives in to temptation. She hides in the cellar to make a belladonna potion, but mistakenly drinks it instead of applying it to her eyes. Ginevra uses too much blood on her cheeks and removes her veil, appearing disheveled. Meanwhile, Alessandra questions Macedo about his speech, but they hear someone approaching. Alessandra hides while Macedo pretends to be asleep. Ginevra enters and kisses Macedo, but quickly withdraws, feeling something is amiss. Due to the belladonna's effects, Ginevra confesses that she prefers women and is Jewish. She mistakes humming outside for angels and hides alongside Alessandra. Fernanda arrives dressed in black, holding a knife. She binds Macedo's hands, blindfolds him, and takes him away. Getting suspicious, Alessandra and Ginevra decide to tail them, realizing that Fernanda is using the donkey as an excuse. They trek through the forest for a few hours until nightfall, when they finally uncover the truth about Fernanda's secret activities. It turns out she's a witch and meets with Marta and other witches in the forest. They find the witches dancing around a fire, barely clothed, and preparing Macedo for a fertility ritual. Ginevra is thrilled by what she sees and joins in the dancing, stripping off her clothes. Meanwhile, Fernanda sits on Macedo, ready to sacrifice him. Macedo pleads for mercy, making Fernanda believe that they have cured him. However, Marta silences him and prepares to use a knife. Suddenly, the dancing stops as the witches notice Ginevra, who is panicking due to the effects of the belladonna. Ginevra attacks Marta, causing them to fall to the ground and fight. After a struggle, Ginevra manages to knock Marta unconscious, while Alessandra takes the opportunity to stop Fernanda and free Macedo. The sisters demand an explanation for Macedo's lies, but their conversation is interrupted when Ginevra runs off with the donkey. Moments later, Ginevra returns to the convent, creating a commotion by yelling and pounding on every door to wake everyone up. The bishop is the first to find her and tries to calm her down while she recounts everything she witnessed. The rest of the group arrives and also starts sharing their experiences, leading to a heated argument that only ends when the bishop discovers that Ginevra is Jewish. Confused and frustrated, the bishop goes to find Maria, who emerges from her room with a pair of men's pants on her head. Suddenly, Macedo begins to speak, shocking everyone. Tommaso emerges from Maria's room and declares it a miracle. The next day, the bishop compiles a list of all Ginevra's wrongdoings and decides that her punishment will be a year-long fast. However, he realizes that this will starve her to death, so they settle on her skipping lunch every day for a year instead. Then it's Alessandra's turn, and the bishop warns her that her father will be disappointed, causing her to plead for mercy. When Fernanda's turn comes, she couldn't care less and continues to roll her eyes at the bishop's scolding. Finally, the bishop passes judgment on Maria, who keeps exchanging glances with Tommaso while he speaks. In the end, the bishop decides to strip Tommaso of his priesthood and send him away to a monastery. Tommaso tries to bid a heartfelt farewell to Maria, but the bishop kicks him out. Soon after, a new priest arrives at the convent, and they choose an elderly man to avoid any trouble. Unfortunately, his shaky hands make it quite bothersome during communion. The bishop also ensures that Ginevra is finally baptized. Later, the sisters apologize to each other and wonder what will happen to Macedo. Meanwhile, Macedo has been returned to Bruno, who divorced his unfaithful wife and remarried. Bruno keeps Macedo locked up, explaining that instead of executing him, he will keep him alive to inflict as much pain as possible. Once Bruno is gone, Macedo tries to persuade the guards to set him free, but they simply laugh at him. Suddenly, a mysterious person leaves a turtle with a candle on its shell near the door. The guards are so captivated by it that they start following it. As soon as they are out of sight, the sisters enter to release Macedo, leaving a doll in his place. They also provide him with a knife and his own habits so he can disguise himself and hide with them in the convent. When the guards return, they fail to notice that the prisoner is now just a doll. The group then flees through the forest and spots the convent's donkey on the bridge. It turns out that Maria is using Fernanda's plan to secretly meet Tommaso, and they share kisses under the moonlight. And with that, the movie ends here.